What is the price of a perfect note? This is not a story about angels or music. This is the story of the factory that manufactured them. Every symphony begins with a single note. For the girls of the Ospedale della Pietà, that note was not a choice. It was a sentence. This is the story of a sparrow born in a gilded cage. Not a story of a place, but of a life within it. The life of a girl we will call Lucia. Lucia entered the world through a wall, the scaffetta, a turning wooden box. Her mother, faceless and forever unknown, placed her there one damp morning and spun her from one life into another. She was not greeted with a lullaby, but with an inspection. Tiny fingers were examined for dexterity. Ears were tested for sensitivity. She was not assessed as a child, but as raw material for the institution's singular product, music. The Ospedale was not an orphanage of care, but a factory of virtuosity. Its purpose was not to raise daughters, but to cultivate instruments. The great composer Vivaldi taught here, writing furious, beautiful concertos for these invisible prodigies. But for every angelic chorus the public heard, there was a childhood, quietly unmade. Let us follow a single day, Lucia's day. It begins not with a sunrise, but with a bell. A cold iron clang at 5 a.m. in the perpetual half-light of the dormitory. There is no heating. In winter, the breath of 40 girls hangs in the air. They rise, shivering, to wash in basin water already filmed with ice. They dress in the uniform, a plain dark dress, a white collar. Uniformity is the first lesson. Individuality is a distraction from the craft. By 5:30 they are in the Sala della Musica. The practice begins not with music, but with silence, posture. The correct way to hold a violin, a bow to sit at the harpsichord. A sister walks the rows, a thin, rigid cane in her hand. A slouching shoulder earns a sharp tap. A drooping wrist, a stinging rap across the knuckles. At age 5, Lucia learned that pain was the first teacher. While children in the city outside might chase a dog through a campo, her world was this: the grain of wood under her small fingers, the terrifying expectation of the note, and the swift, sharp correction when it faltered. Breakfast is a silent affair, a piece of hard bread, a thin porridge. Then back to the hall. Scales, arpeggios, for hours. The same passage 50 times, 100 times. The goal is not expression, but perfection, a flawless mechanical reproduction. The maestro, perhaps a man like Vivaldi, does not see little girls. He sees violins, cellos, oboes that need tuning. He is kind only to the instrument that performs without fault. Ever so often the children are tested. The girls are made to perform alone before the Board of Governors and the senior sisters. This is not a recital, it is an audit. Lucia stands alone in the center of the great room, her tiny form dwarfed. She plays. Every stumble, every note less than crystalline, is marked in a ledger. The failures are not punished with more beatings. That is for daily discipline. The failure's punishment is erasure. She is removed from the performance roster. Her name is taken off the board. She is given the most menial tasks, mending robes, scrubbing floors. She becomes a ghost within the walls, a warning to the others of what happens when the asset depreciates. For Lucia, the terror of these tests was a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the drafty hall. Dinner is another meager portion, perhaps soup, a piece of fish. After dinner, there is more practice by lamplight, eyes straining. Then, finally, evening prayers. Thanks is given to God for the gift of their talent, the very talent that is their cage. They are sent to bed at 9, bodies aching, ears ringing with the phantom echoes of the day's drills. This was Lucia's childhood. Not a series of years, but a single, endless day, repeated thousands of times. Play was a sin. Idleness was a vice. The only virtue was the note, perfectly struck, perfectly held, perfectly released. She was not being educated, she was being manufactured. And like any finished product, the process left its mark not on the surface, but in the very grain. As Lucia grew, the music did not fill her with joy. It was a function she performed. The applause from behind the grate was not praise for her. It was admiration for the output of the Ospedale. She learned to separate herself from the sound, the girl from the instrument, the feeling from the note. It was a survival mechanism, and it left her with a profound, unshakable numbness. She could weep through a sorrowful adagio and feel nothing but the correct pressure of her fingers on the strings. Patrons and grand tourists wrote home of the heavenly music from behind the screen, of the mystery of the unseen musicians. They were items on the Venetian cultural itinerary. They belonged utterly to the institution. Their labor, their art, was not for their own benefit. It was a financial engine. The Ospedale raised them to perform, and the performance funded the Ospedale. It was a closed, perpetual loop. They were human capital, valued strictly for their utility. If a wealthy patron took a fancy to a particular voice, arrangements could be made, dowries negotiated. It was less a marriage and more a transfer of a unique asset from one institution to another. For Lucia, the world beyond the gate was a painting, a noisy, colorful, distant thing she could observe but never touch. Her understanding of love was the approval of a maestro after a flawless run. Her understanding of security was the predictability of the bell and the bread. Her understanding of self was the list of pieces she could perform without error. She did not dream of a future, because the Ospedale was the future, an endless present tense of practice and performance. But when Lucia finally reached an age where her voice or her relevance began to change, the institution's calculus shifted. The asset had reached its peak valuation. The Ospedale's final duty was to offload its retired investment. She was given a modest dowry, a severance package, and ushered to the same portone she had never entered as a child. She stepped from a life of rigid purpose into a world of chaotic freedom for which she was profoundly unequipped. She was a precision tool suddenly dropped into a toolbox of broken dolls. On the day she walked out, burdened by silence, another bundle was placed in the wooden box. A new set of tiny fingers was inspected. A new life was measured for its musical potential. The institution, a perfect self-sustaining machine, had already moved on. The symphony does not end for the loss of a single violin. The maestro simply selects another from the chorus. The grate still stands. The music still plays. Only the faces of the ghosts change.